All righty. Well, thanks so much for all the guests we've already had today. And, it's been 3 solid hours so far. I think there's been some very valuable insights shared. And I hope that anyone who's watching this either live or on our YouTube channel has picked up some good tips and some good perspectives on the process of selling MSPs. So I'm coming in here to kind of take over for Heartland's role and we're talking about post-close success in this session. And we have 3 great guests, 2 of which have already been on previous sessions, and then James Kernan and Josh Peterson, and then Brian Doyle is joining us as well for the first one of the day. And so before we get into the discussion of how to be successful post-close with an MSP acquisition, I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about your business. And maybe we could just start. Heartland did clockwise, so I'll do counterclockwise. So maybe we can start with Brian, then James, and then Josh.
Hey, Devin, thank you so much for having me. And to introduce myself, currently I am the CEO and co-founder of VCIO Toolbox. We are a unified account management and advisory platform serving the MSP and MSP community today. But my history was 17 years as an MSP owner and partner in a MSP that also ran data centers and did a number of obviously M&A events to help grow that organization as well.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And James, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Great to be back with you. So I'm James Kernan with Kernan Consulting. I've been in the industry for over 30 years. First half of my career, I was involved in multiple MSP technology companies, but 7 altogether, but had a successful exit in 2006 and then became a consultant. So I'm today Kernan Consulting. I service an M&A broker, EOS like implementations. I run the mastermind peer groups and love giving back to the channel. That's been so good to me. So it's good to be with you.
Great. Thanks, James. And then Josh, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Devin. Josh Peterson, Baring McKinley. We're an operationally focused management consulting firm working on that, sales, service, financial analytics, really getting into the people, process, performance, and the tools that MSPs use. Been doing that for about 18 years now. And love this topic you guys have put together, Devin. So excited to continue on here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And yeah, let's get right into it. And so we're talking about post-close success. And the first aspect of this that I'm hoping that we can discuss relates to the cultural integration post-acquisition. And James, you actually mentioned on an earlier session that the number one reason that you see deals fall apart are the cultural elements. So I think that was a kind of fitting as a segue to get into our discussion today. And I thought we could just start off by talking about what are some of the cultural red flags that both a buyer and a seller should look for when exploring an exit or acquisition.
Yeah, culture is such an important topic. It means so many different things to so many different people. But to me, culture is the leadership team, and it's what I call the moral compass. It's our personal core values, our beliefs, what we think right and wrong. And we just have to all know that we're different. We have different upbringings, different religions, different families, different business experiences that make us all different. Hopefully most of us are very similar, but as a result of that, people's, their purpose and what they do, how they act, how they treat others, it's very different. So to me, it all starts at the leadership, core values, the people. Is it a fun place to work or is it a nightmare? Is it, do they pour back into their employees or do they take away from the employees? And you need to it's not just a post-closing. I'd look closely at this in the very beginning. But I've seen a lot of deals fall apart and then become a catastrophe even afterwards, but primarily because of it's not a culture fit.
For sure. I got the benefit of sitting through a session last fall with an organization that's buying, I don't know how many, they probably had 30 acquisitions in the last 3 years. And, you know, obviously this leader, the CEO, talked a lot about culture. And to James's point, yeah, what are the core values? What were your core values? What's the other company's core values? Getting alignment to see if this can even work. I mean, I think people will power through that, right, wrong, or otherwise. But I've observed so many mergers just fall apart and turn into a nightmare, and no one's happy, and the profitability just isn't coming. Just really bad scenes. Well, listening to this gentleman in the fall talk about it, he emphasized just that transparency, that project plan of saying, how are we going to mechanically do this? When I think about that and think of the people that I've seen really struggle through this, every answer was in that project plan. Just knowing, hey, we're the acquired company. We're on our heels a little bit. Does this new leadership have a plan? Can I really see, step by step what's about to happen and when it's supposed to happen? And do I want to be a part of it or not? It's when that acquired company or anyone during that merger doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel seen, doesn't feel considered, that morale just goes to zero. And it didn't have to, with some great communication from all the leadership team, which of course would speak to, is that who we culturally are?
And a big part of my role when we were doing acquisitions was, post-close, to go in there and bring that culture message to the new team. So, I would actually embed myself in their offices post-close and make sure that I kept the open door policy there so people can come in and express any of their concerns that they were having, but also try to understand where we were trying to take this going forward. Because in most acquisitions, the rank and file have not been educated to the why in the acquisition. And we really need to help them understand why we're making this move, why we felt they were valuable, and where they're going to fit in the new hierarchy. And sometimes that message might not align with their goals as well. And that's okay. We can ferret this out and get that on the table much earlier. So, I found it was really important to get close to those teams and give them an opportunity to voice, where they sat and how they viewed culture. And then, of course, push down our culture message to them, which hopefully was in alignment with their core values as well.
Yeah. Devin, to this point, let me jump back in. I wanted to comment on something. I remember vividly, like it was just yesterday, and this was eons ago. I think I'll run out of fingers and toes if I count how many years ago it was. But the very first acquisition I was a part of flew from San Diego, went to Honolulu, Hawaii, and we were in the process, ownership team, our company, we were buying Micro-Age of Honolulu. The business had been around for 30 years. The old owner wanted to get out. He was busy golfing all the time. But I remember coming into that office and walking through the front lobby and walking into a room, and there were like 22 employees sitting in that room. And they were all terrified. And I walked in the room, and one of the other owners was with me, the president, and he elbows me and made me go first. And I just remember reading the room real quick, and I could see they were scared. And I remember the first words that came out of my mouth. I said, "Congratulations, you're now part of a bigger team." So I said something positive, and I said, first thing I want to say, everybody has a job. You wouldn't be in this room today if you didn't have a job. So congratulations, you're part of our team. We're going to do some exciting things. And then I went into the vision of where we're going and growing as a company. And I was really trying to pour back into them that we cared about them as people. And I remember also saying, hey, the first thing I'm going to change here is nothing. And what I meant by that was that we're going to listen and learn. We're going to keep we're going to keep the culture the way it is. We just want to add to it and build on it and make it better. I could see the anxiety, just the room just felt better after those things. So I don't know, maybe it was by chance I said those things. They weren't scripted. I just felt I needed to say it, but it was really important to kind of pour back into the room and put yourself in the shoes of the employees that you're potentially acquiring if you're in that scenario. And they need to be assured of things. They might hear one thing from the old business owner, but now you're the new boss. What does that look like to them? And it's very personal and it's very emotional. So, when I talk about culture, that's an important element to it, is pouring back into the people.
Yeah, let's elaborate on that a little bit. So, what sort of anxieties are we talking about? What sort of considerations do the employees join a new organization have? I mean, there's everything from there's the day-to-day, what's going to affect their job. There's the cultural concerns in terms of the direction of the company and how the company represents itself, and there's the financial concerns of their compensation and how their performance is judged. And for that matter, there's also the technology aspect of it too. Is their job going to have to change in terms of what tools they're using? Is there upskilling that's going to be required and things like that? So what would you say would be the kind of the biggest anxieties that to address amongst those employees, and how would you go about addressing them?
Well, I can speak to a recent merger that we're a part of from the tools aspect. And I've been doing this a long time, and I never would have thought that this would be the thing that really killed, not killed, but really made so much friction in the merger here was the acquiring company wanted to get the PSAs merged, and great culture in that company, every reason to be excited, but that acquired company, they were very proud of their PSA to the point where I was like, this is incredible. It's a surprise to me how proud you are of your PSA, and to see all of your years of struggle to get that thing really great for your company and have that merged into what they thought was an inferiorly built PSA. That was a bit of a shock for me, but I think the takeaway for me was, they're really vested. They're vested in what they build. They're vested in the effort and the scars that they've gotten along the way to get it what they considered right. And as awesome as the acquiring company is and was, they didn't see that coming. And that team that was acquired really felt disrespected through it. I can think of 3 really key people that have left from that. And that was a shock for me. But I think understanding how vested people are and how you do things would be on the top of my list now of important considerations.
Yeah, and I would like to kind of piggyback a little bit on what James was saying about the fear part of it, because that's what we really saw oftentimes during these acquisitions. They sometimes didn't know until the day before the acquisition occurred that it was even happening. So the fear for their own job security is a big one, but I'd say the fear plays on both sides of the equation too. Part of what we were acquiring was the talent that was coming from their team. And obviously in the MSP world, the engineering and customer relationship can be a very close-knit one as well. So, one of the things that we were fearful of was, are these folks going to stay? Are they looking for new opportunity because they've been hearing about an acquisition? Where do they all stand? And are they really, it's not easy to say on the bus yet because it's brand new, but are they people that want to continue to go forward with us? So, it really is about the listening, the understanding where they're trying to go. And another thing I really saw was they were fearful about what future opportunities look like for them. They knew what their path was in the existing organization, and they don't know what that means to them here because they really don't know how they've been represented during the sales process.
Yeah. There's a lot of things from my side that I've seen. Compensation, you always want to do equal or greater pay than what they're getting now, or it's going to be really challenging. Benefits, and shockingly, it's not. They want all the benefits plus more, but it's funny things to me like vacation time and PTO. It needs to be equal or better than what they had before. Seniority, it's a big thing. That's a huge liability on people's books. They've got, because of seniority, now I've got 4 weeks paid vacation already accrued. Does that roll over? That's something that people are really concerned with. And then back to Josh's point, the tools, training, their day-to-day duties, who they report to. Those are all things that need to be addressed, ideally before, to put their minds at ease. And then it makes it a lot easier to connect them to the vision of where things are going. And kind of back to Brian's point, what's in it for me? Is there a career path? Is there greater opportunities? And normally there is, if you're acquiring something and they're becoming part of something bigger.
James, I don't know what you've seen in this too, but we saw some of the biggest challenges around compensation with sales compensation when we brought in acquisitions. For the most part, the teams had, salary, maybe bonus structures, but when you look at sales comp, oftentimes that didn't align. Have you run into any challenges there, in acquisitions, in retaining top sales talent as a result?
Yeah, that's something you need to figure out ahead of time and make sure, again, it just goes back to my comment, equal or greater. We should know what the commission history has been for the top producers. We should know what the performance numbers are. And most people have different comp plans. You're just going to want to compare what they had versus what you're offering. And the fastest way to lose a great salesperson is change their comp plan, right? So that was always something near and dear to my heart because I grew up in sales my whole life. And ran all the sales teams. So I wanted to make sure we retained the talent and so forth. And however, maybe to your point, Brian, if a lot of the acquisitions that we had, I was with a bigger entity and we were buying lots of single location resellers and MSPs. They overcompensate sometimes, and they pay a lot more than what you should be paying. And at least the first 4 acquisitions I was a part of, they were distress sales. They were all 4 were getting ready to go out of business. And the bank kind of winked and gave us a nod, and we kind of got involved before they went bankrupt and the bank would lose money. We would buy them, give the owner a way out, and then make them a branch in the model that we had. But many times because of poor compensation policies, so in some instances, Brian, we had to do some fancy footwork and kind of explain the upside of like, oh, you can sell everything that you used to, but we have so much more to offer. And to your existing clients, ultimately you can make more than what you used to make, even though the commission rates are a little different. So it took a little salesmanship too.
Yeah, that was always one of the stickiest parts we had during acquisition, was that compensation piece. We would usually honor if it was in favor of them for the remainder of that year, but then convert over.
Yeah, that's smart.
So there's lots of reasons why companies do acquisitions, but one of the ones that we see is looking to expand into a new geographic market. In a situation like that, occasionally what will happen is you'll have the company that's being acquired, let's say, is maybe running remotely, and the acquirer is someone who has all the employees come into the office. I'm curious if that's something you guys have any experience with and how you would navigate that sort of a challenge in terms of company culture, and trying to make it so the new employees are still feeling involved, and like that they can actually participate in the culture while being away from the main office.
Well, I can say from my seat, we mostly were acquiring to expand geography. So, the core component of it was, as I mentioned earlier, I would embed myself in their office for a period of time, at least 3 days a week, so they would have visibility. And really for us to make sure that we were maintaining accountability of their teams. We didn't, in many cases, their management might have been stepping away during the acquisition and we needed to get in there. We wanted to make sure that we over-communicated early as well. So we would we would share information more often, and we used to do quarterly get-togethers too. We made sure anytime we made an acquisition that the next 2 quarters we were doing on their home turf, and gave them the ability to decide what we were going to do. So it wasn't a challenge for them to get there. We were embracing them, and then they could see that greater team as well. So those were a couple, simple things that we did to try to embed, our team with the new team and get people to meet each other face to face, and not just from, over a Zoom session or on a phone call.
Yeah, I agree with what Brian was saying. It's, go to them, embrace them, pour into them, because it's a critical time. If someone's going to leave, it normally is right after the acquisition. That's your very vulnerable time. And again, many people's strategies, growth by acquisition, you're moving into a different geography, but you need to retain the best people, and you want to keep as many clients as you can. You really don't want to disrupt or change things. So, or just involve them in all the other fun things that you're doing, and don't be cheap. You can't do Zoom meetings. There's something to be said, and we've all learned this now over the past 4 years. Video meetings are great. You can learn a lot, but nothing beats that face-to-face interaction with human beings. That's really how you develop relationships and trust with people. So that's important.
And Devin, to your specific example of, one company works remote and one works, everyone shows up to the office. That's probably one of several kind of very hot topics that should, obviously come out during due diligence and come out during the negotiation. And while that's happening, that, the acquiring company and the acquired company, they can be coming up with their project plan to say, what are the non-negotiables? We know that we value people being in the office. So have a plan. The shock of I have to come in, starting Monday is going to be pretty big. But do they see that you have a plan? Do you see that you have a ramp period through that? Do they see that you've thought about this ahead of time and you're going to do everything you can to make it as less traumatic as possible? If they see you have a plan, if they can tie that to your mission or your vision or your purpose statement, they're either going to come on board or they're not, but might as well stack the deck in your favor by being organized and having a thoughtful plan on how you're going to make that transition. If that's a core, then that's a core. You better have a plan.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and we hear so often one of the questions that we get from buyers is, well, are the employees going to stick around? And the answer is, well, the employees don't know about the acquisition yet, and it's really up to you to put together that plan to make it attractive for them to stick around. Touching on all the things that we've mentioned here, the compensation and the benefits, and making sure that their time off is accounted for and all that. But it is something that both usually the buyer and the seller are aligned on, because the seller wants to make sure that their employees have a good home, good working environment going forward, and the buyer wants to retain that talent. So,
Devin, let me jump in real quick, because you said something important there about retention ideas, because you're buying the people, right? So a couple of quick things on that. One, you'd want to make sure they have employee agreements, so the employees won't quit the next day and then go work for someone else and steal all your customers. I think with the right language in the agreements, I think that's important. And then, I lost my train of thought, but the employee agreements are kind of a key point to that. And then I'll circle back in a minute, because I think there was another point I wanted to make on that.
Yeah, and definitely the employee agreement, and these days it sounds like non-compete clauses are not as enforceable as they maybe were in past years. But that's also a question that we get a lot. Or is your employee going to, is there anything in the contract that prohibits them from, essentially leaving the organization and trying to work with these clients directly? So that's something that comes up a lot too.
Yeah. My other point I wanted to make is I'm seeing more and more, especially on bigger deals, like retention bonuses and retention carve-outs of stock for key producers or key people to motivate them. You can call them the golden handcuffs, or you can call them retention bonuses, but they're effective. And if you connect people to embrace their culture, you connect people to the vision of where you're going, and then what's in it for them. If there's stock options, I'm seeing more and more of that, which is interesting to me, because, I think retaining the key people is critical to your success over the long term.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, great. So, it came up on an earlier session as well. There was one of the panelists was joking that the reason why MSP owners get into the entrepreneurship business is that they're not particularly employable people. And this relates to the next topic that we wanted to talk about here. Was just, when you do have an MSP owner who's getting, gets acquired, and now they're taking on an employee role. What should they expect? What's going to change? How should they adjust to that new role?
Tell you, one of the biggest challenges I saw, and even I went through as we merged into a larger entity, even though I retained partnership in it, I didn't have the same voice, right? And you have to learn how to adjust on not having the same level of, authority potentially within the organization as you did unilaterally when you had yours. And that's something I think a lot of owners don't put a lot of credence to in the acquisition journey of how much different that may be coming on board. Now, the acquirer usually does, obviously look at those people as very trusted authorities and certainly know that they've carried knowledge and done what they've done. But it is a different position to be into when you come on board, and you do have to make some concessions, which can oftentimes be difficult, for some owners coming in. And I've seen people in acquisitions we made leave very quickly because they just didn't like the fact that they didn't have the same equal voice that they had before. It was maybe proportionate to whatever their stake in the game was still afterward.
Well, and I this is a very near and dear topic to me. Over the last, I think it was 2011 when I first kind of anecdotally started tracking this, and I looked it up the other day in preparation for this. Of the 27 people that we've seen go through this, the average retention of taking on that role with the acquiring company was like 13 months. And most of them kind of said 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. And by 13 months, they tapped out. I obviously have a few people that have been there for 5, 7 years and are happy as clams and they love it. So you got to go into it knowing that this is all on me, most likely. As the seller, I'm either going to succeed or fail in here, all on me. This company wants me. They think they want me. Can I put my ego aside? Can I keep the head junk away? Can I remember that I sold for a reason? Can I be of service to the success? Some of that might be impacted by if you agreed to an earnout or some sort of carrying a note. But it really is you getting in the head space of saying a great leader can also be a great follower. I'm here to support their mission and their vision. And if I don't think I can do that, I should figure out how to minimize the type of role that I'm taking on and act accordingly. Of those people I just mentioned, I know a lot of them very, very well, and a lot of them are assholes, right? They couldn't keep their mouths shut. They had to talk that shit. They had to kind of overly empathize with their employees, and they didn't do anyone any service, and they left mad. They left frustrated. When really just a little self-reflection going into it is saying, how am I going to react? What can I control about how I behave in here? You can't go into it thinking it's just another day at the office. And I don't think many people do, but I think they minimize that hit that it's going to take to the ego to say, I'm helping support someone else's vision now.
Yeah, a lot of at least owners or shareholders in the previous company have earnouts over time, and that is self-motivation for a lot of them to stay maybe a little longer than they want to. But I agree with what Josh just said. That's really important. And then back to my comment around culture, in the leadership style of the acquiring company, it's important to let them have a voice. It's important to embrace them and treat them, still treat them as senior people in the organization. Let them have a voice to the best of your ability, and include them in what makes sense. So you treat people with respect, or you can disregard them. And I think if you treat people the way you want to be treated, you're going to be much more likely to have a longer relationship with them. And remember, one of the big reasons why all those customers came to that business you're acquiring in the first place was because of that business owner. That's a key relationship. So you want to keep them as long as you can.
Yeah, we found that, in a couple of cases too, it also was the condition of the actual acquisition, right? Sometimes when we were bringing on distressed assets, those owners were ready to take the employee role. They kind of acknowledged that they didn't maybe have the skills to, take it to the next level with their business. They were able to get it just so far, and they're ready to come in and be more of an individual contributor or more of a manager of a particular section as opposed to running the entire organization. I know that a lot of times when we had leaders that, really wanted to continue to run the show, those were the ones that would definitely be short-lived, in tenure afterward, because they just had a tough time finding their place, within the organization, no matter how we tried to share culture or put them, in part of the communication piece. It was tough for them to relinquish that full control.
So how should a former owner, how much should they be involved in meetings, whether it's meetings with customers that they already have a relationship with, meetings with new employees and their previous employees? How should they be involved in those meetings going forward, and how should that be handled as it kind of transition through?
I'd always like, pre-close, right at the very tail end of the due diligence, when you're in the purchase agreement negotiation contract language, but right before you close. To me, I would love to involve the owner and go meet with the top customers, involve the owner and go meet with the key employees or the group of employees. Everybody's going to they're going to hear what you're saying, but they're going to look at the other owner and look at the body language. Is this person excited about this, or they're not excited? Are they going to be part of the package moving forward? And hopefully they are. Those are all important pieces to it. And then, Devin, it really depends, I think, on the circumstances of why the person's leaving and so forth. Let's just say that person's staying on. He's a key part of the business. I would involve that person as much as possible. And my philosophy, if you want the acquisition to be successful, leave it alone is the best you can. Maybe from the customer's perspective, maybe change your logo or your EIN number on the invoice, and that's it. But keep everything as similar as possible to minimize, turnover of customers and minimize turnover of employees. Now, clearly, maybe there's different tools and metrics and things like that will roll into the business to track, or maybe more service offerings. But the ideal scenario would be, you're taking what they have and you're making it better. And get everybody on that same sheet of music so they see that and believe that. Then I think it'd be a lot more successful.
We took a slightly different approach to it, believe it or not. And, I do agree with you, James, about, going out and seeing maybe a couple of the key clients that were the top revenue generators with the owner. But we actually used to like to set up meetings with the customer, with potentially one of the key players on the team. Maybe it's a sales rep, maybe it's the key engineer working, but not bring the business owner forward, because we also wanted the customer to have a forum where they might feel comfortable expressing where they'd like to see things done better. So, we would go visit with them, try to understand the relationship. You'd find out very quickly, usually just through the tone of the meeting, who was really close and there because of the business owner as opposed to just the service. But a lot of times in that forum, they were finally able to say, hey, these are some of the things that have been slipping lately. Because a lot of times during an acquisition, that's part of what happens. And we'd like to see this get pulled back in. And we saw when we brought the business owner in at least the first round of acquisitions there, those customers didn't speak as freely with us until the second or third meeting, just because the owner was there and present and they didn't want to offend them. So a little bit different approach and tact that we took, but it definitely got us to, embed ourselves with the customers. But then I follow where James was at. We did not change contracts. We didn't do anything different for the first year that we had these clients to make sure that it was smooth. They were comfortable with us. They didn't have the fear things were changing, and it was a smooth transition.
It's great advice there. So putting yourself in the position of the owner being acquired, how would you go about evaluating what the employment opportunity looks like? And how would you go about looking at whether or not that is something that you'd like long-term?
Yeah, I think that very straightforward question is, what role are you offering me, and do I enjoy that? So if we factor out the component of I've got an earnout or I've got some sort of compensation, motivation for retaining these clients, if we just kind of take that out for a moment and say, what do I like to do? What am I good at? What have I always wanted to do or spend more time doing that I wasn't able to do before? You've got to continue to be very honest with yourself. you love account management and they want you to be the CTO, God, you probably are qualified to do it, but is that not fun sounding? Is that not interesting? Is that not something you can pour yourself into? Well, you've got to be very, very upfront. So I think number one is what do you want to do? What is it that's going to drive you to be the best version of yourself in this new company? And be clear and say that may not be the right fit for me. Are these other options available? But do I want to do it is got to be number one.
Yeah, I love that, Josh.
Yeah, what I'm seeing out there is, especially like on the larger transactions, the owners or shareholders want out. They don't want to stick around. They don't want to work for someone else. They want to leave. The smaller ones, they need a JOB after this because their earnout or their upfront payment isn't going to allow them to go retire. So they want to stay involved, and that normally is best under most circumstances. That's not always the case, but it goes back to that other comment. For all employees, including the old business owner, just needs to be equal or better. And a lot of what I've seen are, they get hired at salary, and then there's a bonus based on performance, their performance or performance of the branch. And then typically there's some type of earnout that's over a period of time. So, you add up those three things and normally it's pretty good. It's probably a lot better than what they were getting before. So.
And one thing I get from sellers, one kind of concern on the earnout side of things is they're usually tied to some sort of contingency, usually around some sort of revenue metrics being maintained. And then there's an element of trust that comes in where, like, okay, well, you're not owning the company anymore. You're not the one who's kind of overseeing the accounting and the reporting and all that. So you kind of have to have a level of trust with the business that is buying you too, that they're going to be honest when it comes to the reporting. And it's not something that we see come up too much in practice, but it's a natural concern for a lot of sellers. So I would just add that's a big part of it too. And there's the old gut instinct part when you're meeting various buyers who are inquiring, kind of following your gut in terms of who you should think you can trust. It goes a long way there too.
There's an example I can share that was in the Midwest. I was representing a seller. There were partners. They sold the business. Both partners went to go work for this new entity. This new entity was probably 3 times the size they were. So each of those 2 partners kind of took a middle level management position or mid senior level management position. And again, back to my culture comment, the cultures were very different. So everything started exposing itself for 6 months, 12 months. The owner that I knew real well, the earnout was 24 months. He couldn't make it that long. He ended up quitting after about a year and a half, and he just walked away. Now that he was still supposed to get his earnout after, regardless if he was an employee or not. And then he ended up going to work for a competitor, and then they turned it off, and it ended up into an argument. But analyze closely that culture and the values of all the parties involved in pricing methodologies and philosophy. There was somebody wanted to get out of the business as a partner within 3 years, and then the other person didn't want to get out of the business for 20 years. And fundamentally, that's so different. That's the kind of stuff you need to figure out in the beginning, not when it's too late.
Yep. So we have one question here from the audience, and before we go to the next point, I thought we could just address it. So it's from Robert, and he's asking, what things do you anticipate changing for interested PE acquirers as they reload funds and as their focus matures over the next few years compared to now? So did you guys have any thoughts on that? It's a little bit different in the post-close success topic here, but I thought I would get Robert's question in front of you here.
Could you read that back one more time? I want to make sure that
Yeah, I'm
heard.
reading it as well.
Oh, okay.
So he's essentially asking how are things going to change for private equity acquirers over the next few years, and he mentioned, for example, deeper levels of expected integration, things that private equity is learning but doesn't know yet, etc. Robert, if I got your question right there, let me know in chat, or if you would like to clarify, that would be helpful too.
Well, from my seat, just talking to some of the folks in the PE space on M&A, and then also some of our customers at VCIO Toolbox being part of large roll-ups, the things that they're learning quickly, and I might be able to speak a little bit better from that side, is what makes a good match for these more aggressive PE roll-ups that might not focus as much on culture as, a couple of private firms coming together. And one of the biggest things I keep hearing is tool stack and commonality of tools to what the rest of the group is working. They're looking at easy ways to integrate people into existing process. That way it's a smooth transition. And obviously from a PE perspective, they're also looking at where they can trim fat. So, looking at ways to, pull out some of those administrative costs. And generally that comes from having very similar platforms, at least at the core areas, PSA, RMM, and in those areas, and making that very manageable for them to plug into a bigger ecosystem, which also helps the PC the roll-up reports a little bit easier as well. Now it's easier to get things integrated from a finance standpoint, from a big picture first. That's at least what I've heard and seen anecdotally from the folks that I've been speaking to.
And I think that's an important part, important point to consider if you're selling too. That, especially if you're smaller, there might be a temptation to use a tool that's less expensive, maybe an open source tool or something like that. But that's going to make your business less attractive to a whole subset of buyers who want to align with their own tech stack and their own product stack. So. Okay, so I also just want to talk about, and this goes back to cultural as well, transitioning clients post-close. So I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on how to go about that smoothly. Brian, you brought up the point of, maybe not bringing the previous owner onto those initial meetings so it gives the client an opportunity to voice some of their concerns. But do you have any tips on that, and especially as it relates to the timing of when to let customers, know that the acquisition has happened and how to frame it?
Well, I can tell you from the way we approached it, we went out quickly. We scheduled meetings with those customers really with a goal of seeing, if possible, all of them within the first 4 weeks after the merger, before really first billing change, if possible. And when we got there, it was really about listening to the customer, and I can't stress that enough. They're nervous too, what this is going to mean. Usually their first concern is this going to change what my cost structure is? Is it going to change my level of support? Am I going to lose my favorite tech or whatever, their connecting source was to the original MSP? And you want to set those fears aside and say, look, right now it's status quo. We need to learn you. We need to learn your needs. We need to understand that. Contracts will be honored the way they were signed until the next renewal. That is your contract. We as an acquiring company undertook that in good faith as part of what we were doing. And then we wanted to listen to them and just understand, where the concerns they might have in a transition like this is. And, it was very common fare. Once we got through those first level of things, then it became that discussion of, well, what else we'd like to see? Maybe this improve, or here's an initiative that we really haven't addressed that I think can be done better. And by opening up that dialogue and really setting the fear aside, it really allowed us to kind of expand the relationship in most cases. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat and say we kept everybody, but we did see, for the most part, unless the relationship was truly on shaky ground past the point of no return beforehand, those customers stayed with us and in most cases flourished.
Yeah, I love that. I think going out fast is a great way to do it. I've seen other people take an opposite approach as well. I'm going to go slow. I'm not going to raise my own objections. I'm going to do the very bare minimum that's legally required, and not throw this in this client's face that, hey, change is not going to impact you. I don't think that's a bad strategy either, to just take your time. You can tell them all day long things are only going to get better. But I think getting to know who these clients are, look at those client satisfaction reports, look at that latest Net Promoter Score, do some internal ranking with the company that you just acquired, talk to the staff, learn about what those clients give feedback on, and really choose your strategy well. It would be my angle on that. I think fast, slow, whatever works best for you, but know who these clients are internally before you make that decision.
Yeah. Clients like being in the know. So for critical big, if you want to retain them, and that's why I like the idea for like the big clients that are really, really important. If you can let them hear about the acquisition face to face before they read a press release or get an email. I think that's important. I like both of their points again of honoring the terms and conditions of the previous contract. What can we do to make things better? What can we improve on? And if you can minimize their fear right out of the gate, we're going to honor our contract, the term, the pricing, all your primary points of contact are the same, except we've got more resources available. You're making it better than what they had before. You're not going to lose them. That's unless something really bad happens. So I think that's all really important. But I liked the face-to-face meetings, if or when you can, as fast as you can before any kind of press release gets out there, or mass email.
Yeah, I mean, we really found that was a critical step of doing it, because people just want to know that they're appreciated too. Some of the people were actually surprised we came out to see them because they were a smaller customer for the client. But at the end of the day, all of them in aggregate are what we're purchasing. And if we're even doing right by the owner that's selling for their earnouts, we have to do everything we can to preserve that revenue. I mean, it's important for all of us in that equation.
Yeah. So, especially for smaller MSPs, often you'll hear the owner will say, customers, I try to get them to submit tickets, but they call my cell phone, and that's how they submit their support requests. And so how do you go about kind of navigating that sort of a situation where you're trying to train new customers to adopt, the new systems that the buyer is implementing, and when they're used to what they've been doing with the previous company?
Well, I'm smiling a little bit because we came out with welcome packs right when we showed up at those meetings too. And they were built specifically for what to expect in the new relationship. Here are your new numbers that are critical to you. We would tell them even, hey, we've even made a deal with the owner because, as they're coming to the end of this, they need a break too. They're not to answer any of your calls. They now, those messages get transferred to another phone. The reality was we were trying to show them there is a process, and we would tell them also, test out our help desk. If you don't get a response in X amount of time, within our SLAs, like we appreciate, if it's not equal to or faster than what you were seeing before, then we'll talk about alternative measures. And in many cases, they found out by going to the help desk, they would get a response much quicker because we had a much deeper help desk as a result of the acquisition as well.
Yeah. To Brian's point, in order to get 5-star service, here's what you should do. Follow this process. And there's 5 different ways to open a ticket. The worst way is calling the cell phone of the old owner.
Yep.
He may be in the shower, or, could be in the store, and miss the call, but we'll respond in X amount of time. That's our process. So, pointed out as a positive to get the full experience. And, people normally would conform pretty easy. The only time that they then want to go back to picking up that phone and making a call to the old owner is if there's some kind of problem, but that just goes into the training of onboarding them. And I like Brian's point of, giving them a welcome packet or a welcome letter, and explain to them, it takes a little bit of training, of how to get the full experience.
And put your help desk on high alert too. If you're going to try to force that behavior, you have to be on top of it. So we would make sure that, our teams knew who the new customers were, that if you see these things, I'm not necessarily saying jump past something that's P1 critical, but if all things are equal, try to hit that one first, just because we're trying to make that impression and help them know that this is the proper flow long term. And we kind of ran in that manner for usually about 90 days post sale, to make sure that we embedded those people into the process. And usually at that point, everything normal would take over.
Well, great. So, I want to, Heartland's going to jump back on in a couple of minutes here just to kind of wrap up the session today. But anything else before we wrap it up here? Anything else that you guys want to mention about the post-close success, the cultural elements that we haven't touched on here?
I'll just reiterate, have a project plan, have just very, very transparent communication with the team. Let them see you work that plan, give that team a lot of communication, get in front of them, have clarity on your roles, have clarity on the compensation, have clarity on the career path opportunities, and then live it. Telling and talking is one thing, doing's another. You have a project plan, make sure they see how you're progressing through it, whether you're failing at it or succeeding at it. Just, you can't communicate too much and you can't show action often enough.
Yeah, I'd say surround yourself with the dream team of consultants. So you need a broker, you normally have a consultant, you normally need the tax person, your CPA, really good one, and a good attorney. Contractually, and engage them early. Don't wait till the end. You need to involve them in the whole process, because there's a strategy that goes into every road that you could go down with every opportunity. So engage them and surround yourself with smart people. That's my advice.
Yep, and I'll just close with, when the sale is made, that's really when the work starts. There's a lot of due diligence up front, but now you really have to work on integrating those companies, integrating those customers in, and don't underestimate the amount of effort that's going to go with that. It will be a fair amount to retain that revenue long term.
Well, thanks so much, guys. I think those are some excellent insights. Really appreciate you jumping on the session today. And if anyone wants to reach out to Josh, Brian, or James, we'll have their contact information available in the video on YouTube, and I'd highly encourage you to reach out to them. And just thanks again. I really appreciate you hopping on with me today.
Thank you, Devin.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, just wrapping up here, not only this session, but the whole ExitCon of 4 solid hours. So Brian, James, Josh, thank you guys so much for joining. It's been a pleasure having you. Tons of value, and I'm looking forward to next steps. And I know that not everybody was able to see all sessions, so it's the recordings will be shared out. So thank you guys. To anybody who's listening, either in the recording or live here, to know that if you are looking for opportunities of companies for sale, then please go to our site and subscribe. You'll get access to the weekly list that we publish every week on Wednesdays, typically, and it's free to subscribe. You can also, if you're a prospective seller, go and take a look at some of the other listings to sort of get a sense of what's out there. We'd love to have a conversation with you, and if you want to have a confidential conversation with either Devin or myself, please feel free to reach out. Lyle can put up the contact information, but info at the host broker is probably the easiest email to use. So thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your day. And everybody who's participating, thank you for your time as well. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.